Thank you, Ashley. All right, well, welcome to the May CAB call. Glad you can all make it. We've got it should be a very interesting presentation later from Stark and Wayne on Carousel, which is a cool CredHub credential rotation tool. But in the meantime, I guess we'll kick things off with CFF highlights and updates, and we've got Chip here to give those today.
Well, I'm giving one, then you're talking about the summit. So
okay, sounds good.
Get yourself prepped, Chris.
TOC elections.
Yeah, so the main one that I actually wanted to make sure that we reminded people about today, not just for those that are online, but those that tend to watch these things asynchronously later, is that we are in the midst of the nomination cycle for the first ever technical oversight committee election. We have there's been a group that's the context here is there's been a group that's been working through setting up new governance structure for the project that will be a little bit more, let's say, in line with similar projects in this space. A technical oversight committee is essentially the group of elected leaders that can make decisions about how we're going to structure working groups around the code base. And then their whole job is to essentially find ways to delegate responsibility, of course, down as far as possible to the people with hands-on keyboards, writing code, and designing specs for new features. But it's a very, very important role that we need good qualified candidates for. There's two things that I'll ask anyone who has contributed any code or any support of end users, or really if you just contributed to the open source community, essentially in any way in the last year, you should be eligible to vote for the purpose of not spamming everyone that may not have enough interest. We did a bit of an automated report to try to identify people that have contributed. I think it was at least 25 times, and plus or minus a few. And so there's a voters file that has a bunch of names listed and your employer or your affiliation. So if everyone can take a moment and check to make sure that if you feel that you've contributed in any way over the last year, you'd like to vote, make sure you're in that file. If you're not, follow the link that I put in the CAB agenda to open an issue. It's a really low bar to entry to get to vote. Just fill out that issue and you'll probably be added. The second thing, though, related to the TSC election is that we're looking for, of course, nominations. The member companies of the CFF for this very first election, and only for this very first election, all of the primary contacts at every member have been given an opportunity to say, hey, as a member, here's the name of a person that may be non-obvious today, but really has been very involved in the community, and so we want to nominate him. But what's supposed to be the majority of the focus for the nomination cycle, and the way that it will work for every future annual election, is that the community members themselves and yourselves need to nominate either yourself if you're qualified, or nominate your peers or your coworkers, or the people that you've worked with in the community that you think would be a great person to be on the TSC. And so there's a simple issue type that you can use to make that nomination. Both the go check to see if you're an eligible voter or you're going to receive a ballot because you're in the voter list, as well as the actual nominees for the election need to be completed by the 28th, right? So we've got 9 calendar days until that whole cycle closes out. Any questions about that before we move on? I'm going to take dead silence as everybody gets it. Awesome. Cool. Chris, off to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chip. Only other one major point from CFF, and that is that CF Summit CFP closes this Friday at end of day Pacific time. And in some previous cycles, we've extended that. There won't be extensions this time. So this is effectively a very last call for proposals. So if you or any of your peers or folks on your project teams have started a proposal, make sure to wrap that up. And if you've got something you've been thinking about doing, you got a couple days, you can try and put that together and get it in. So yeah, try and sound the alarms and get people to put in their proposals as soon as possible if they can. And that's about that. We did have a fun live stream. Ram Shedrack and I and all of the co-chairs, the 6 co-chairs for the 3 summit tracks, had a live stream yesterday. That was a lot of fun. Actually, I'll drop that YouTube in the Slack. I mean, in the Zoom meeting, just for anyone that might want to check that out. So yeah, after CFP closes, all the co-chairs will meet next week and put together their schedule. So definitely excited to see what they put together. But yeah, CFP closes Friday, so let everyone know. And that's all I've really got from CFF. So with that, I'll ask Eric if he wants to run through some app runtime PMC updates.
Yeah, I'll give a few highlights over the past month or so. We've had a few updates from the integration projects, new version, minor version of CF deployment, v16.14. And then I think maybe even a new major version of CF Fricates with some Istio upgrades. Those have to be, I believe, sequenced correctly. So watch out for those if you're upgrading through those versions. And then kubectf, I think they recently uncovered that there'd been some issues with drain scripts not working correctly, but they think they have that resolved now with some updates to the Quarks operator. And the last I've heard from Jan is that they've been facing some woes with their CI system. I think some accounts got reaped or something. So that may have unexpectedly removed some of their pipelines. And then with some of the more component projects, I know the CLI has been working on resolving a log cache interaction issue with the V7 CLI. I think if there are some apps that have 0 instances running, then the CLI can really hammer the log cache endpoints if it's trying to get data for apps that aren't there. But they're expecting to have a release out to fix that pretty soon. And the CAPI folks, they've been continuing to work on some of the manifest diff work that I'd mentioned before. They're also starting work in earnest on some additional roles related to app management. I know there's been some proposals that have been circulated about that recently, but I think they're starting to build those out. On the Irene side, they're continuing to do work on refining the CRD versions of their REST API endpoints. They've also recently been looking at, in more detail, at the feasibility of using a Kubernetes deployment to back an app and what the consequences of that with some of the different indexing might be. A couple other updates. I know networking has fixed some port collision issues on the TCP router Bosch job, where it would occasionally collide with some other deployed jobs. They're also looking more seriously at upgrading to NATS 2.x. Currently, there's some really good performance benefits that we would get from upgrading to that version of the NAT system. And then finally, the logging and metrics folks, they've been working on improving some pipelines to handle PR contributions and making that a lot smoother. Anyway, so those are just some of the highlights. Happy to answer any questions if people have them. A couple other things I wanted to mention. I know CAPI's started running monthly office hours that should be on the CFF calendar. I think logging and metrics might be doing that too, although I'd have to check the calendar.
Yeah,
and then
Fridays, I forget which Friday of the month, but yeah, it's Friday logging and metrics one.
Yeah, and then I think I'd mentioned this previously, but we recently had in the past month or so a document trying to set out the future vision of what all the CF on K8s activity should really look like. And we've been having some really active discussions in the CF for K8s SIG meeting every other Tuesday morning, Pacific time, evening European time. So I think we're expecting that to continue. We started talking a little bit more about the potential technical architecture that would underlie that and how it might mesh with both supporting the CF API on top of that, but introducing some more native CRD resources in the Kubernetes API that would correspond to some of the cloud controller entities. So again, really ask if you're interested, feel free to drop into that and join those discussions because that's something that we know is a super important direction for the community. And we want to make sure that we have a clear pathway forward that everyone is aligned on.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Do we have anyone from the Bosch PMC? I don't believe so. Okay. Well, there is one big news out of the Bosch world, and that's that Bionic stem cell hit v1.1, which is the official GA release. And I know that was big news for a lot of folks who are relying on that. So that's great news. A lot of work went into that. So congrats on wrapping that up. I don't have any big updates from extensions per se. I will say, if anyone's interested, the last cab call last month, for folks that weren't there, it's a really great presentation from Paketo Cloud Native Build Pack folks on basically everything you could want to know about, build packs, V2, and newer Cloud Native build packs in Paketo. So you can watch that video at your leisure. So yeah, take a look at that if you want to get more of a deep dive into Paketo.
Where that video is posted?
It's in the cab call. So it's on our YouTube channel, but it's also in the cab channel on Slack. Just scroll up a little bit and you'll see it there. And with that, before we move on to our presentation today, does anyone else have any other topics they want to bring up? Okay. And with that, we've got Michael Ferris of Stark and Wayne talking about Carousel.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. All right, so I'll keep this presentation pretty quick, but I'm pretty excited about this. Like you mentioned, Carousel is for rotating creds within CredHub, which is enough to be excited in the first place. I'm also really excited about it because I'm someone who's spent, like anyone who's done any deploying, you spend a lot of time debugging. Why isn't this deploying based on, and you need to go poking around in CredHub and you end up with a lot of stuff in CredHub and you're not exactly sure of what's being used, which deployment is using which CredHub. And so basically Carousel provides a Bosch aware interface into CredHub to show you exactly what is being used. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you what I'm talking about. So let me exit out of here. Let me go back one step and show you how I got here. All right, so Carousel just takes in a couple of environment variables to talk to CredHub and Bosch, obviously. And so the first aspect that I'm talking about here is the browse feature. That's what I'm talking about with being able to see what's going on in your CredHub and being able to jump around in a way that's a little easier than just doing CredHub gets and continuously typing in those keys and everything. And so you can basically just walk through your entire CredHub like a tree and see information on the sides about what's going on with each of your certificates. So for example, we end up with this nice view of our certificate, information about when it expires, what deployment is using it. That's something that I find very useful, as opposed to coming into CredHub and not necessarily knowing, like with these, that they're not being used by anything. So yeah, I find that useful. And from within here, you can delete if you had a bunch of unused stuff. It does, as it should, give you a recommendation not to do this manually. It could lead to an inconsistent state. And you can toggle transitional from here. And the whole tool is a work in progress. We've got a couple of to-dos that you'll see if you download this right now. You'll see a couple of obvious to-dos, but we're excited about it and wanted to show it off. So that's the browse, one of the 4 commands. Then we obviously also have carousel rotate, so if I do that, I'll show you kind of the options we've got here. You can do something like carousel rotate, anything that expires within 2 weeks, and just filter based on stuff like that, based on the name. let's do a carousel rotate of everything. And what it's going to do is show that we've got a couple of things to rotate, but mostly we have a lot to clean up that's not being used. And so we will continue. And it starts cleaning that up for us, and then it'll start rotating. And then so there are 4 commands that carousel provides currently. The third is carousel diff, which once this completes, it will show us the fact that these have been changed, but that they're not being used by the BOSH. It'll show us basically what's going to happen when we do a subsequent BOSH deploy, which again is just useful to BOSH awareness, being aware of which creds are being used by which deployment is something that I find useful and would have found useful many times in the past. So I'm very happy about this tool.
Mr. Ferris, quick question. Does this just work against the certificates that are in Cred Hub, or is there anything for the passwords as well?
My understanding is that it works for everything.
Gotcha.
Also for passwords.
Mhm. And yeah, we can just do any more questions. We don't have to sit here and watch this in silence.
The other good feature about this is that when you have your security team that wants to know what's going on with certificates and stuff like that, you actually able to browse it and show them the information, and you don't have to keep going back and forth. You could just literally just give them the tool, let them do what they want, and they shouldn't really cause very much damage as long as they don't run other commands. So that is also helpful to some of our clients.
There is nothing deployed probably in your setup.
Yeah, it seems like I might be pointing at the wrong BOSH, but that's okay. I didn't intend on making everybody sit through a BOSH deploy anyway. So yeah, we can conclude there. Anybody have any questions? Or any Wainers have any additional things?
Can you talk about the 3-step rotation?
Oh yeah, so from here, maybe Ramon might be better to talk about this, but my understanding is that from here you'll end up with transitionary certificates, and then after you do your deploy, you can rotate again and redeploy to get your final rotated certificates.
So yeah, there are 2. You basically need to do 2 deployments now instead of the 3. But it will create, so the BOSH Cred Hub will create a certificate with the old certificate attached to it, and then you will do a BOSH deployment, and then your next rotate will basically clean up and remove the old certificate. Then it will create a new version in Cred Hub with only the new certificate, and then you can deploy your deployment again. So this is just, yeah.
Thanks. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Would it be nice maybe to just have created a small deployment and then do an actual rotate? But
I wasn't sure how much time we were going to have here. I'll keep it quick. Yeah, I was going to, 1 second.
But yeah, here you can see, if you select on that, you will see that BOSH is using that. So you enter again on this entry.
Oh yeah,
then you will see that the deployment is using by that current deployment. It's probably mislabeled. And it's not Carousel that's mislabeled it, but it's what the BOSH deployment is called.
I think that's the CF.
No, the DNS health check TLSCA and DNS API TLSCA are specifically used by BOSH itself. So if you call your Bosch now Labs Yev, then it's a bit misleading. I think
Yeah.
we played too much with the demo beforehand. You can try and see what.
Yeah, so all it did was clean up then. So yeah, could have made a better demo starting state.
So the diff command shows you what you need to deploy. So what affects that certificate or passwords, whatever else you have to do.
So what you can do is, Mike said you can do carousel rotate, and then you can do older than. Yeah, so older than, and then just 1 day, basically.
Yeah, because it defaults to 12 weeks. Okay, thanks.
So now all these will regenerate it.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, so
Yeah, so what happens here is we prevent passwords. This is a good showcase, by the way. We prevent that password that has been manually set and not generated by CredHub. We are not rotating that password. It's probably you did it for a reason, that you didn't generate a password and you put in a password manually. So then you can do like -name with string, and then you can do like the default encryption, like, I don't know.
yeah, I'll grab one of these.
Yeah, let's call anything with call like DNS. No, you just need to name the DNS health check CA.
Oops, it did not copy well.
Yeah, and then you still need to do older than, because by default it will check for a certain amount of weeks. I think 12 weeks now.
12 weeks, yeah, you're right.
Is this also deployed today?
He probably rotated during testing.
Yeah, right.
Okay, yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you try, because it tries to regenerate the UAA default encryption passphrase that is generated, but it's not a certificate. No, it's not in there anymore because you cleaned everything up. If you now do a diff, it will say there is something wrong. We should have better prepared this demo.
Yeah, my mistake. All right, well, we can end it there.
Well, this is the excitement of live demos, and we get the gist. Super cool tool, pretty powerful. So, yeah, no worries.
For me, the thing that excites me about it is that it solves a very common challenge at client sites.
Yeah.
A lot of manual time is reduced greatly. That's the biggest win right there.
Yeah, for sure.
The other big one, you're able to see the whole thing at once. You don't see one things at a time. You're actually able to see the whole tree and figure it all out. That usually helps a lot when you're trying to, work through some of these relationships where something breaks because of the certs are broken. So you can actually see the chaining that goes on.
Mhm. Yeah, development on that is going to continue. Flush out some of those to-dos I mentioned.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much, Michael and Ramon and everyone else, Stark and Wayne. And I guess, is there anything else we're missing? Anything else, last minute topics anyone wants to bring up? Okay, well, with that, thank you all for joining. We will see you on the third Wednesday of June. Don't know what day that is exactly off the top of my head, but looking forward to that. And yeah, thanks all for joining, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thanks everybody.
See ya.
Thanks.